and welcome to Cav Chris TV. My name is Jason J. Rock Houston. We got a good friend of mine on once again, Carl Canedy from the Rods, legendary drummer. Carl, we're going to be talking all about this today. Your book, Tales of a Wild Dog. Now, let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about your decision to write the book and why you think it's a good time now.
Well, I decided to write the book. I've been asked through, doing a number of interviews over the years.
Sure.
Everybody said, a lot of stories, you should write a book. So, my attitude's always been, who's going to read my book? Nobody cares. And but my daughter would talk about, she would always say, wow, every time you tell a story about your childhood, it's very sad.
Yeah.
And, I thought, well, that's not cool to leave her with that. There's been a lot more to my life than my childhood, obviously. I've been able to live a fairly long life so far.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I should do it for her. So I wanted to do in my words. So I did recordings. I would talk into my iPhone and record them. And then I would think of a chapter and I would title it and I would kind of do the whole thing. And then I was contacted by Philip Harrington. Doc Harrington he said, I'll transcribe your recordings, that was killer. I was like, that's it. Then that's what I'll do. I'll give you the recordings. And so that's how it came about. But it was for my daughter. And there were a couple of times when I was going to pull the plug twice. And Philip talked me into it. Doc was like, no, you've got to go through with it. Your book is different. It's unique. And, and it tells your story. But there were some issues with transcription and different things. I'm like, if it's not in my words, then I don't want it out there. My daughter will have all the audio files.
Sure.
So, why put a book out that is not in my words? So I think we laugh about at one point it came up with copious tears. I'm like, when the hell did I ever say copious tears in my life? Never said it other than now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was how it came about. And that was the reason for my daughter, Erin Alexandra. And I guess for my daughter,
as far as
Madison,
nobody caring, weren't you wrong, my friend? I mean, #1 on Amazon. It's a bestseller. I urge people to really go out and get this. It's a great, and Carl, I've interviewed you several times over years. When I first started interviewing bands and musicians, you're one of the first people I ever interviewed. And I, like I said, done it several times over years. And I tell you, even all the times I've talked to you, just reading the book, I've learned stuff about you that I never knew. And so I think it's a great idea putting the book out. Now, let me ask you, you said your daughter was the inspiration to put out the book. I'm assuming she's read it by now. And, what was her initial response to reading the book?
That's a good question because I don't think she's read it yet.
Interesting.
Well, her husband bought it, unbeknownst to me, but it was very kind of him. He bought the book.
Yeah.
And he's read it. And we've talked about some different aspects of the book that he's read. But my daughter is a school teacher. She has a new baby, 6-month-old. So she teaches school. She comes home. She takes the baby. It just hasn't been time. Now she'll be off this Thursday.
Sure.
We're going to lunch with our 92-year-old friend, her adopted grandfather.
Wow.
And we're going to lunch with Ken. And I'm sure after that, she'll have some time this summer to read the book. So right now, I have no idea.
And I was curious, when she was growing up and you were, busy living your career and going on the road, did she attend many of your concerts? Did she ever, get to go on the road?
She didn't because I didn't want to be an absentee father. So I waited.
Okay.
And so I was older and I wasn't on the road. I had a recording studio when she was born. So I was home. And I was managing Young Turk and I was managing some other bands. So I did some traveling. I was flying around the country to Miami, to Tampa, to California, whatever, Texas. I was flying around. But in general, she didn't. And I always thought, geez, I wonder if she'll ever get to see that side of my life. And then as time went on, the Rods reformed and then she got to see it. So it was cool.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Another interesting thing I read in the book was, kind of your stance on drugs. You talk a little bit about early in the book, early in your life, like you had one real bad kind of experience with LSD. Talk a little bit about that because I was reading in the book after that, you have the attitude from that point on, I'm never going to get up on stage and perform, drunk or high. And that must have been some impression or that experience that you went through.
Well, it really wasn't the acid experience. It may seem that way, but it wasn't. It was, I was playing when I was 13, I got a set of drums and was in a band by 13 and a half. And like I say, as I reflect on what that band must have been like, they were older guys. They must have sucked so badly because they had me as the drummer. I couldn't play anything. I played probably ding, ding, bang, ding, 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 bang. Probably just a very basic beat and probably not steady. So, they must have sucked. No offense to them. I don't remember their names, so I don't can't offend them. But it was as I got playing more, I started seeing musicians who were older. Some of them got busted doing drugs.
Yeah.
Some of them went to jail. Some of them died. And I would see them, they just lived to drink. When I
Yeah.
started playing clubs, they like couldn't drink enough. They lived for it every day. And sometimes they'd be drunk and pass out. And I just said, you know what? I'm never going to play drunk or stoned, and I practiced 6 and 7 days a week. So I just never did. And
A
that
great
was,
decision for all those reasons. I mean, the alternative is look at Jim Morrison, super talented guy, dead at 27. Jimi Hendrix.
it's,
Yeah.
if an addiction gets a hold of you that's potentially lethal, you can definitely, expire before your time. And also, I don't, for me, if I take a shot of something like one, and I don't drink, but I've
Yeah.
had it where immediately I feel it in my muscles. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
play. We played a show with Y&T and Leonard drank 7 shots, I think. And
Wow.
we were like, how is this guy standing? And he went on stage and he was the most solid, dead on guy. Like I didn't play that dead on at the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't playing with a click track and I just was kind of free form, whatever I wanted. Time is a magazine, I can bend it any way I like. He just was like, we were in awe that he could
Wow. Wow.
play and that
Yeah.
he played in time. Amazing.
And of course,
Nice
the
guy
drum,
too.
the drum, playing drums is really physical. I mean, you got to be fit and in shape. I mean, it's almost like a workout, right? When you're up there on stage and pounding those
It
drums.
definitely, it definitely is. I can flex my muscles right now.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, yeah. Um, and now
I
another
it's
thing I didn't know
definitely
about you is
cardio.
your time with Manowar. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, were you ever officially a member, or were you just kind of playing with the guys?
No, I mean, that's a good question because I was asked to join the band and I started, I was there at the Genesis. I was there at the
Yeah.
rehearsals. I was with them for the showcase. We got them the record deal, EMI. And so, it was my decision to not continue on. But I knew they were going to be huge. Joey had the vision, Joey had the determination, and Joey had the brains. And so I knew they were going to be a huge band.
Now, when you were playing with Manowar early on, when they were just forming, had they gone to the point where they were wearing the costumes yet?
No, because we were putting it all together. They had written songs and we were arranging them in the rehearsal hall and playing them. So we really hadn't gotten to the next phase.
And you know what's amazing? I don't think you could play in any two heavier bands than Manowar and the Rod. So, what ultimately made you make the decision, which I kind of think was the right one for you, to go with David and go with the Rods?
David and I've always been tight
Yeah,
and I've always respected his playing and respected him. But I respected Joey and I love
sure,
Ross
sure.
and Eric's a phenomenal singer. So I knew that we played so well together, the Man of War
Yeah.
guys, Joey and I were a tight rhythm section and Ross and the songwriting was so good. And of course, Eric's vocals on top of it. But I wanted to write songs and I wrote a lot of songs back then. And I wanted to be a songwriter as well. And I knew from day one that with Ross and Joey, they were writing great material that I would never be able to write anything in the band. So that was
Okay.
a big decision for me.
Yeah. And now talk about your desire to be a songwriter, because let's be honest, unless you're, Phil Collins or Don Henley, typically drummers are known for being songwriters. I mean, even Carmine Appice is a great songwriter in his own right. So
Yeah.
was it just a matter you knew that was a way to make money, or is it something you just had a passion for wanting to be involved with the songwriting?
Yeah, I've never approached music from the let's make money
Yeah, I
standpoint.
got you, I got you, but yeah,
No, I should have, I suppose, maybe a little differently. But I never have. It's all about making the music. It's not about making the money.
Yeah, yeah.
It's nice when you get rewarded, nice when
Yeah.
you get paid. No, I didn't write as a means to make cash. I wrote
Or,
because I would, I would pick up my Les Paul every day, and I had a box of
wow.
inexpensive cassettes. And every day when I got up before we go to a gig or whenever, I would play. I turn on my recorder and I would just start working on riffs and different ideas. And I still have a box of them I've never used,
Wow.
of riffs from that time period where during the Wild Dogs and the first album and all that, that I have of song ideas that must suck because I didn't develop them, but I have them.
So how good of a guitar player are you, Carl? I mean, do you typically like pick up a guitar just like for songwriting purposes, see if you can come up with a riff to start a song idea, or can you actually um, play the guitar?
Want me to get my guitar and play
Sure,
something
sure.
for
I
you?
mean, whatever.
No. But I can play,
Okay,
I'm not a shredder, but I
I
certainly
got
know
you.
my
You can
chords,
you can
know
hold
my
your own.
rhythms, and I also play leads. I'll play leads, and like on the song 1982, I wrote the music and I wrote the guitar solo, and David, followed the template.
Pretty
So
cool. I didn't know that about you. And now
mhm.
that's another thing I'd love to ask you. I always love to ask people, like in your case, being the drummer, how did you pick the drums as your instrument of choice, or would you say the drums chose you?
Definitely the drums chose me. When that, like I tell the story in the book about how my mother took me to it was a VFW, and there was a
Oh yeah, yeah,
decommissioned tank out front, right? And then
yeah.
I walked in. Now I had to be 5 years old, 4.5, 5 years old, something like that. And I saw that graded, the little thing. They have the low stage, but then they have open, but then it's a grating, like metal grate along for the bandstand. And there was a set of red drums in there. And it was like the Hallelujah Singers, and the white light shone down, and it was like I was enthralled and I was hypnotized. And so from that point on, all I wanted to do was play drums, but I didn't really know what that entailed.
Yeah.
I just was, oh my God, I want to play drums. It was like a driving passion. And and then when I was in seventh grade in California, I arrived late. My
Yeah.
mother moved us out late, and so I had to go to school, and I wanted to join band, and they had all the drum chairs were gone. So I wound up with a clarinet. So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
but
You played all these different instruments, which I think is probably has helped you in your career as a producer. I was reading also in the book in the late '70s, New York was there's actually more of a punk scene than an actual rock scene now. That being the case, I mean, did you ever have any desire to play punk music, or what was that like? Where punk music was so relevant back then.
yeah, we didn't have where we were um, in upstate New York.
Hmm.
We didn't really, the punk thing was not big,
Okay.
but I certainly was aware of it. We opened for a couple of bands who were from England who were punk bands. And I even loaned one, I think it was Haircut 100 or one of the bands. I loaned them part of my Ludwig drum set that I still have. And it occurred to me there were no cell phones. And after a few weeks, he's on tour. I'm thinking, how's he going to know where to get me unless he brings them back to, I think it was my friend Arden, my girlfriend I was seeing at the time. I think that's where he picked them up. Unless he comes back to Arden's or something, or I gave him the number.
Wow.
So after a few months, I thought, or after a few weeks, I'm thinking, wow, that was really stupid. And then sure enough, brought the drums back. So,
Wow. Wow.
but yeah, but anyway, I was aware of it. But the one thing, and I didn't love punk per se.
Yeah.
What I loved about punk was the energy. Just go for it, which has always been my kind of thing. I don't really, even to this day, I just played a track and it's always on the edge, and I tell people when I send them my drum tracks, don't touch it. Don't beat detective. Don't do any kind of modification. If you want me to replay it, I will,
Yeah.
but I don't want them touched. And, I play it on the edge, and I try to have that element of discovering the song while it's at the same time of playing it so that it has a human feel, and it has an energy that comes with it. And I guess that's definitely punk derivative.
Yeah, yeah. And then I was curious if you were at all a fan of any of the thrash bands. The reason I ask is you talk a little bit in the book about the thrash scene, how it started out as a real kind of underground thing, and of course around 1986, 87, kind of broke out in a huge mainstream way,
Yeah.
So what did you think of those bands and the way it kind of just all of a sudden exploded?
Well, when I first heard Anthrax,
Yeah,
I was blown away by how great they were. And it was really exciting to work with them. They were young, they were talented. Um, and, my goal was to make sure they were tight and made a record. And of course, Danny Spitz was a monster
yeah,
guitarist. He was a shredder, but his rhythm playing, as good as it was, wasn't up to the Scotty and Gold standard. So, and Scott wanted to play some leads, I think, but Scott wasn't a great lead player compared to Danny. So there was a little, like there was a little kind of a ruffled feather or two for a second, but they realized that Scott was the guy for rhythm. When we were doubling his tracks, he was spot on. And Danny was the shredder. And so that really turned into the formula for Anthrax during that period of time.
and would you
But
say Scott Ian was kind
but
of
I,
the needed ingredient for Anthrax, in that he wasn't a super flashy player, but he wrote most of the songs. He was kind of the backbone of the band. I mean, you even go into how he came up with that kind of not motto and designed a little not man. So he was, even though he wasn't the lead singer and frontman, a lot of people for many years, I remember seeing Anthrax back when they thought, oh, that's the lead singer. He's the guy who does all the interviews.
yeah, I think Charlie Benante really deserves a lot of credit for the songs.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
Scott worked on, but um, Charlie was the guy who was coming up with a lot of those riffs. He's a really good guitarist, but yeah, Scott was phenomenal in that, and was interesting to see because I have a book where they had to sign for per diems every day. I wound up paying the per diems several $1,000s while they were at the studio because Johnny Z was on a shoestring budget, didn't have money for them to even eat. So
yeah.
I was fronting the money every day. And on that book, composition book, Scott wrote not the not book,
Yeah.
and they would
Well,
sign it in
while
different
we're on the
names.
subject of Anthrax, talk a little bit about how you got involved in producing Fistful of Metal.
Well, I had met Johnny. We spoke on the phone. He was working with, I can't remember. Chris Bubach is the one who told me about Johnny Z, and he was bringing in Metallica. So I called him and said, "Hey, I produce. If you need any assistance, I'm available." And we hit it off right away. In fact, excuse me, I always have to say rest in peace, Johnny, because Johnny was he was a great friend right up until the end. He was going to write the forward in my book, and he was ill, and he just couldn't do it. And he would apologize. Maybe I'll feel better next week, but it never came to be. And finally, I said, John, please, I have somebody else who's going to write it, and thank you. And but Johnny and I became great friends all these years, and Marsha too. But Johnny and I were tight, and so Johnny was the one who suggested Anthrax, and rest is history, as they say.
And let me ask you, being a drummer, I mean, your job as a producer, of course, is to make a great sound for the band. Have a kick-ass overall sound for the band. But being the drummer, do you tend to focus on what the drummer's doing a lot, or how hard is that to get focused on everybody?
Well, you have to focus on everybody,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it depends on the band. When Anthrax came in, Charlie was a one-take guy. Like I
yeah,
told Charlie right away. He spent the night at my house one of those days, and we was doing drum tracks. And said, Charlie, you're going to be a modern drummer guy. You're going to be on the cover of Modern Drummer.
yeah.
Like he was phenomenal. So with Charlie, I would make minor, if any, suggestions, and that was it. Like he had his parts, he nailed them down, nailed them first time, second time through. So Charlie was never an issue. When it came to Overkill, Rat Skates was a sweetheart, but first night he partied, his legs burned out, and so when he came in, he really wasn't able to nail some of the fast double bass he was trying to do, attempting to do. And so I had to talk with him, and came back the next day, rested, and nailed it all. But so you just deal with it. But normally, if the drummer is on top of things, I just move on because I could probably ask them to play it a certain way, but why? They have their own style. I respect that. So, same with
Man,
me. If I'm playing something,
yeah.
you know, leave me alone and I'll play my parts as long as they're working.
And then now, of course, another band you would go on to produce is TT Quick. How surprised were you that since then the success he's had fronting Accept?
Well, Mark is such a great guy. I can't say enough about how much I love Mark. All the guys really.
Sure.
Um, they're really all great guys and so talented. Dave's a monster, they were really talented guys. And Glenn's a wicked drummer,
Yeah.
obviously with Nuclear Assault. And so, but Mark, I always thought Mark would be a star
Yeah.
long before, and Mark, even with after being with Accept for several years, on my solo album, Headbanger, he drove up here twice to
Yeah.
sing songs on my album and wouldn't take a dime, wouldn't even take gas money. Like that's the kind of guy he is, a great guy. But I thought Mark would have been a star long before, but I'm so happy for him. If anybody deserves it, he does.
Like many people just need the right vehicle, sometimes. And
He was perfect for Accept and brought them back.
yeah, I mean, they tried to have other singers, but he's the one guy that the fans latched onto and kind of really accepted. So, good for him. Now, you were talking about your solo album you did a couple of years ago. Is there another one on the way, or we busy pumping out a new album for Virage? Like I understand.
Well, the Rods album is coming for sure.
Yeah.
And yes, I have another, I don't know what we're going to call it, but I did the Headbanger album, which was a solo album where I had my friends come and play and sing. And then we did the next Canedy album, which was a band effort, Tony Garuba, Charlie Rosello, and Mike Santasiero. So right now, Mike Santasiero, the singer from that Canedy album, and John Hahn, who also played on my solo album, we have another project that we're working on, and then what can I say? We always say it's great, but
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. If nothing else, I am happy with it. Very happy. And so we'll see where it goes. We'll see what's up. Billy Sheehan's playing 2 tracks on it. We'll see how
Wow.
much involvement we have from Billy going down the road. I mean, the guy's
Yeah.
on the road all the time,
Yeah.
as he should be cashing in on his fame. And but anyway, the so we'll see. But the album is really turning out well.
Yeah.
So
Billy's another great. I mean, Shredder's a bass player. I mean, a
he
lot of people
is.
like me first came discover him through David Lee Roth, and he's done the Winery Dogs and Mr. Big. In fact, Mr. Big's on their farewell tour, if you can believe it or not. So who knows? Maybe his time will free up sometime, in the next year or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
I remember we recorded the first album, and John Petrie and Chris Bubach were telling me about this bass player in Buffalo
yeah.
who played classical songs on his bass. I'm like,
Wow.
classical on the bass, it's unheard of. And it was Billy.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. If you look at his career, like I mean, especially with Mr. Big, I mean, he's a shredder, and yet like Mr. Big, the one big hit was that acoustic song. It went number one.
Mhm.
And then the one place they're really huge in is Japan. And I've understood for years that they could do like 4 shows a year in Japan and they make a ton of money and they've never have to play anywhere else. But it's just amazing how different parts of the
They're
world,
huge in Japan.
yeah, respond. But another thing I've always wanted to ask you, Carl, is typically you are the spokesman for Garage. You do typically most interviews. I know David from time to time will take part in an interview, but you're a lot more talkative. I was just kind of curious, is that why that kind of falls on you? You're the most talkative. You don't mind doing it. Talk a little bit about that, because again, is it for a drummer? That's kind of out of the ordinary. Typically, it's the front man and the guitar player that do all that stuff. I think it's cool that you're kind of in charge of that.
So you what you're saying is that I'm a big mouth, right? Is
Well,
that
no,
where
not necessarily a big mouth, but you're very friendly and outgoing. So, like I said, I've interviewed you many times, but you are really kind of out there and talkative. I think it's cool. I was just kind of curious. Did it just kind of fall on you that you're kind of a spokesman for
um
the band because of that?
that's a good question. I think it just morphed into
You're the
I
guy.
have been
Yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I've been doing interviews and whatever, and a lot of times I would have the information and I did a lot of the bookings for the bands for the band once we no longer had management.
Yeah,
So there was information I had, and David likes to do them, but
yeah,
I think it gets boring for him, sometimes. Whereas for me, it's never boring.
yeah. And again, each to his own. But um, my other show, This Is Metal, we've had you guys on a couple times. The last time we had the whole band on, it was it was fun because I've interviewed you and Freddie a couple times, but first time I got to speak with David, and he's kind of really soft spoken, and it's funny because, like I say, each their own. But when you see him perform on stage, he's a monster, and that, and
Yeah.
he's very soft spoken, though, not your typical front man.
We've had my friends have come to see us who have never seen the band before, and they would come backstage. And David and I go seek out tea after the shows. We in the morning on tour, we get
Yeah,
off the bus and we're like, "Where's the little shop where we can get Danish and tea?"
yeah, yeah,
So, but backstage, none of us are crazy. None of us are drinking, doing drugs. We're all quiet. And they're like, "Wow,
yeah,
you."
yeah.
Yeah, she had no. One of my friends said she had no idea what to expect. She goes, then after she went, "Oh my God, you guys are so quiet and soft spoken in the dressing room. And
Yeah,
then you turn into freaking animals on stage." Like,
yeah.
yeah, I guess that's how it works. But
Yeah, yeah. If you don't mind me asking, I was curious, how much younger is Freddie than you guys? Because it kind of like you guys are elder statesmen, and he's a youngin in the group.
well, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Freddie is easy 20 plus years
Mhm.
younger than we are,
Wow,
maybe
wow.
even
And yet
20,
there seems to be a
maybe
great
even
energy between the
25.
three of you guys. So I think it's a tight unit.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Freddie's an old soul, and also I think he's respectful of the geriatric musicians. So that matters.
Yeah.
No, he's great. He is a great fit. He's a great guy. I think part of the fact that there's not that generation gap, if you will, is that he loves the bands that we started with. So
Mhm.
he loves that's in his DNA as well. And he's a bright guy. He's well educated, and he's a class act. So it's a great thing to have him. He's very positive. And and as our tour manager said, when someone said, "Well, what's it like now? You have a new bass player, fresh blood." And she said, "You know how when you have a house with two old cats in it,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and then you get a kitten?" He goes, "That's what it's like. Energizes the old cats."
Yeah, I
And
mean, I'd imagine a guy like Freddie, he went from being a fan of the band to actually playing in the band. So while you and
Mhm.
David are kind of, oh, we played these songs all these years, he's still getting off on it, a lot because it's like, wow, wow, finally get a chance to I'm up on stage with these guys. This is a band I
I'm
was
sure,
listening. Yeah,
yes, I'm sure at one point he was thinking, "Wow, I'm playing with these guys that I really respect and looked up to." And then once he started playing with this, he realized, "Oh my God, this is not that big of a deal. You guys are hacks."
no, not at all. But there does seem over the last 2 years does seem to be a new level of respect for Roz. And what I mean is, you admit yourself, Carl, that the latest album has done so well, and people were buying it, and it was doing great business. Where you guys didn't always kind of get that attention. You were very hardworking band, but it seems like you guys are finally kind of getting the respect that you should have been getting all these years.
Yes, well, I agree with that. And I think that's something that, when people say to me, "You're a legend," I think, well, they're saying I'm old. But
Yeah,
there is a respect that comes with, just keep coming back. You're not giving up. You're going to continue to do what you do, and everything is cyclical. And so what we do is maybe finding a new audience now, a lot of more young people.
yeah, yeah,
But this album had a lot of things come together for us. Mark Rizzo doing the cover, which was a friend Brian Reevy suggested that, and
okay,
Mark brought it to fruition, and it's a killer cover. Like the puppies. When we first
yeah.
set one, we always laugh because the first one the guys really liked, and I said no, they
Hmm.
look like puppies. So the big joke. So Mark went back and made them look more evil and whatever, and took care of the puppies, so there are no more puppies. Um, in fact, for this new album cover, he sent me a mock-up and said, "We don't want puppies," and he sent me a picture of puppy. So it was cute. We
Yeah,
all
in
laughed.
fact, Varaz, I got to again tip my hat to you guys because you're one of the few established bands that still put out new music. There are a lot of seasoned bands that are like, why
Yeah,
bother writing new songs or
I,
putting
I
out new
don't,
music? Nobody's gonna
I
buy
don't
it.
get,
Yeah,
I don't get that. I
yeah,
don't get that. But the other thing is on this album, to finish that question, I think all those elements came to play. We had Chris Collier, someone I wanted us to have a better mix engineer, which we wound up with Chris doing Brotherhood of Metal, and we were
Wow.
thrilled with him. Now, but I've worked with him on the 450s album. I worked with him on the Canedy album, and of course now the new Rods album, and this last Rattle the Cage. And Chris is such a hot mix engineer, but it was great to have total pro, top of the game, mix the album. So that was a big plus for us as well. So, and then the label got behind us a bit, and that was a huge plus as well. So we were really happy all the elements came together.
Oh, wow,
And the
that's
song and the album and the album's actually a very good Rods album.
well, yeah,
One of
yeah, it
my
really is. I
favorites.
mean, from top, it's one of those albums from top to bottom. I mean, I think you could release any song as a single and fans would love it. I mean, just top to bottom, there's not a stinker on the album. But two more
I think
questions,
if
and I'll
you
let you go, Carl. The
yeah,
new
I think if
album
you
that
like
you
the
guys are
first album,
working on, you think we'll see it this year or next year?
I'm hoping for a January release. And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm hoping for. We're
Great
hoping to
way
have
to
it.
kick off a new year, right? And final question, as far as putting out the book, what was the hardest thing about putting the book out, or was there something that you had trouble kind of, I include this or should I not?
Oh, no doubt about it. And I just wanted to finish answering another question. Freddie's sequence Rattle the Cage. David and I were really close. We both had the same idea for the most part. And Freddie said, I have an idea. And David said, what, let's let the new guy do it. And Freddie did a killer job on sequencing. So like I said, all these elements came into play and
Yeah, definitely.
made a big difference. There was a lot, and the book was almost 500 pages. And once we signed with New Haven, they said, this book will be way too expensive. You have to cut it down. So we're cutting out almost 200 pages. That was really difficult. It took about 6 months, and there's probably stuff in the book that got cut that don't even realize was cut. But just Doc did all of that. I just couldn't bear to do it. It was tough enough to go back and make sure it was all in my words, and that was several months of that was
I must tell people, go out and get this Tale of the Wild Dog by Carl Canedy. And Carl, the book just has a real nice flow to it, and it's not something that, oh man, this is boring me. I'll go back to it later. I mean, it flows very nice, and you do a great
that's
job of telling the story. #1 on Amazon. So as far as thinking who's going to buy this, who's going to care, a lot of people apparently care, and I love the fact that you got so many great reviews, buddy.
yes, and thank you for saying that because Doc was really insistent on making sure it flowed, and so was I to make sure there was a story. So when you read it from beginning to end, there that surprise ending at the
Yeah,
end
yeah,
of the book, it connects back to the first part of the book, and we tried to make it so it flowed and
you
read
really
like a
did.
real book, as opposed to just stories randomly.
Well, Carl, thanks for doing this again. I always enjoy talking to you. This will probably be going up sometime next week. Once I have a date, I'll let you guys know. But thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you again in the future.
Thank you so much, Jason. You've always been supportive, and I appreciate that.
Anytime, brother. Bye.
Take care.